one of the groups that we've especially had to work with our families to help is families of children with autism, because, and let me preface everything that I say with, there's a saying that if you work with one child with autism, you can only work with one child with autism. And that's to say
Absolutely.
all of them, while there are some similarities, these students and these children are so special and unique that, it's very important that we look at them as individuals. But from a sort of a global standpoint, one way that I had myself set up prior to the coronavirus, shutting down basically our way of life, was I had a schedule. I had a visual schedule for my kids. Okay, so for my children who weren't readers, I had pictures. So when it was reading time, it was a picture of a book. When it was math time, there was a picture of math symbols. So even my youngest children know what their expectations were for the day. And it was really built around our extracurricular activities. And so, if we knew we were going to be out of the house half the day on Tuesday, that was a very light schedule. Well, that took a lot of work. And so things shut down pretty quickly, right? And so with the families of autism that I serve, I said, you weren't given like 3 weeks notice that this was going to happen. And I understand that this is very sudden for your child. And I'm glad to see in the comments, there were comments of using a whiteboard. So that's exactly a great strategy. And guess what? If your child has difficulty reading, draw a picture. If the first thing you do in the morning is eat breakfast, draw a picture of a waffle. It's a circle with some squares in it, and write waffle next to it. And eventually, everybody in the household will pick up on what those symbols or what those words mean. But I think for any child, it's important to set expectations. But for children on the autism spectrum, some of them really depend on their daily routines. And so helping them understand that a new one has been created, whether you're typing something, we've had families use Post-it notes, because there does need to be some flexibility. And, as you all know, sometimes your plan just doesn't come to fruition. Okay. Sometimes after breakfast, you're not going to jump right into work, and you need to be able to switch this schedule up, and we need to go outside for a little bit. And so, making sure you have something that's flexible is definitely something that I would recommend for families. Whiteboards, you can easily erase. Post-it notes, you can easily rearrange. If you have a child on the autism spectrum that needs a little bit more structure, it's something that they can stick to and it's not going to change, go ahead and type up a list. It doesn't need to be fancy. And then, Lanessa, you had mentioned making sure, especially with articulation practice, when we're working on how we pronounce words, there is a lot of repetition, right? And so we have to think of like really creative ways that we can help our kids practice without getting bored, maybe incorporating it in board games, with common board games. And, maybe every time they achieve a certain goal in the board game, that's when you practice, just to add a little bit to break it out of the monotony of, repeat after me. And that's a good way to practice. And seeing, let's say it's something like putting away the dishes. Every time you put away a knife, it looks like an L. Let's practice our L sound, something that's already in the routine, as opposed to having to reinvent the wheel, because who knows when we'll be back. I think that, there may be a time where one day we all get one of those alerts on our phone to say, hey, back to real life tomorrow. So you don't want to invest a ton in recreating absolutely everything, and definitely give yourself some grace, because transitions are hard for us all. But for families that have children on the spectrum that are living with them, that they're raising, transitions, it can be a little bit more work